Wednesday morning with Marita Candela will be by Skype. Unfortunately, Marita can't make it due to illness. Problems of flying at long distance. The session Protecting the Animal seminar series with I4, we're looking for a replacement for Joaquin who has to go back to his family, so the I4 session is cancelled. The session on the realities of animal lives that had Donna Haraway as well as Linda Williams, Carol Gigliotti is now cancelled. And the development panel, Mining Animals in Development panel, Tuesday at 5 o'clock in room 3 is also cancelled. So there's a few changes. If you need that information again, please see me after this session. So, where's Oscar? Has Oscar disappeared? Oh, there you are. So, first of all, I'm going to hand over to Jorge Linares from the Philosophy School here at UNAM to introduce Óscar Horta. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. Good morning, everybody. It's for me a great pleasure and honor to make the presentation of the Professor Óscar Horta, professor of the Santiago de Compostela University in Spain, an expert of animal ethics, and his recent book is one step forward in defense of animals, in Spanish, un paso más en defensa de los animales. Tomorrow afternoon at 7 p.m. We will make the presentation of his book at the School of Philosophy at UNAM, in the right corner, the beginning of the University City. We invite you. This presentation will be in Spanish with a colleague of us of the School of Philosophy. And now it's time for the conference of Oscar, the case for helping with wild animals. Please, Oscar, welcome to Mexico and the UNAM. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me if I'm here, yeah? No? Yes? Okay, so I'll try to speak up. Well, so thank you very much. Thanks everyone for being here. It's been a pleasure to be with all you, meeting different people from many different places with very different backgrounds. And you've made a great effort to come here, so yeah, thanks. And in addition to this, I can't help thanking especially all my friends here in Mexico, especially, of course, Chris, Ana Cristina, and yeah, the rest of the people of the organization. I mean, you are amazing, really. And also, yeah, let me also, thank and say hi to all my other friends here in Mexico. You know, I love you really much, and I'm really happy to be here. Every time I get here, yeah, my heart gets happy, really. So, yeah, I'm going to present so some of you are, yeah, so I should be closer, like if I'm in a bar or something. Okay, I'll try to speak up, really. Is this okay? Yeah. I feel a bit enclosure otherwise if I'm staying there. Well, whatever. So I'm going to present certain ideas that have been around for some time already, but for some people are new and for some people are counterintuitive. But I think that this is not something that should lead us. Hi? Amazing. Okay, so I think that that's not something that should stop us from considering them, in particular because always when we are considering new ideas, there is something lurking in the dark, which is our biases. So we tend to have a certain view of how things are that stop us to really consider the merits of reasons for and against certain views. And we should be all familiar with this, because we who are involved in animal advocacy feel always frustrated when we see how other people who haven't heard of these ideas, when we present them the reasons to respect animals, and we try to do our best to present these views, they still are reluctant to listen to them, not even to consider them, just because they are new ideas, right? So we are very familiar with this. And in addition, there are several cognitive biases that stop us from considering those new ideas. For instance, the first one is the bandwagon effect, which is that we tend to align our values to the ways in which the values of most people are, right? Also, there is this conservatism in our ideas, which is that we are reluctant to consider new ideas when they are presented to us. We tend to think that the ideas that we used to have are the proper one. And then, in addition to this, there is this other important cognitive bias, which is wishful thinking. That is, we tend to think that things are fine, and we are uncomfortable with the ideas that things may not be as good as we would like them to be. So all these biases really stop many people from thinking that animals matter, but they also stop us from thinking that helping animals in the wild matters. In this presentation, I'll try to present these ideas that may be new to some of you. And even if they are counterintuitive, some of them are for you, I would like you to think of this that we have seen, that we should try not to have the same approach, the same attitude that we don't like other people to have when they are considering the case for respecting animals in general. So first of all, I'm going to start with a bunch of examples about how people are already helping animals in many places. So this is an example, in a forest fire, how, not only humans, but also non-human animals are being helped. And this is another case also in Australia, where another wild animal is being helped during some floods. Again, this case is similar from Bangladesh in this case. And here we have this moose. This was a recent case. It was, I think it was 2 years ago, something like that. And this animal was trapped in a lake that was being frozen. And all these people make this huge effort to try to rescue this animal. And we have another example. This is a jump phone that was trapped in a frozen lake. And again, we can see how people are helping these animals who otherwise would die in suffering. We're also familiar with the case of stranded mammals, right, who are also in many cases helped to try to help them back to the sea. Often they can't make it, and many of them die. But in many other cases, many of them are finally rescued. Again, this is another example. This was the case of a young elephant and her mother who were trapped in a mud pond. First it was the calf, and then the mother went into it trying to help her child, but they couldn't make it. And eventually they were rescued. And this is another case that is well known. Maybe some of you know about it already. Of course, you will know the woman there, Jane Goodall. I know, some people may find this case a bit controversial, only because Jane Goodall has been a controversial person, because, at least for some animal people, because she has been supportive of certain ways of animal experiments and so on. But anyhow, let's set that aside and consider this case. If you've read her books, maybe you have heard of it. When she was investigating the ways of life of a certain chimpanzee community, she and her team found out that some of them were dying because of a certain condition they had. They had polio, and due to this, they weren't able to feed. So the way they reacted was by vaccinating them, by introducing the vaccine in some bananas they were handing out to them. And many people in the scientific community objected against this. They say, well, this is interfering with the object of your study and so on, so you shouldn't have done this. But then we can wonder, would they say this if instead of a primatologist, she was an anthropologist, and she was in a community of human beings somewhere where they had no access to medicines, and they were dying because of this? And then there are other cases in which, for instance, there are animal hospitals where sick or injured or orphan animals are helped all around the world. And again, there are many pictures we could show of different animals who have been helped. These initiatives help more animals because they don't just help individual animals, but throughout a single year, they may help lots of them, right? This is a picture you may know, or similar ones you may have seen from this Australian orphan center for bats. And this is amazing. I always mention this because these animals, bats, you know, they are often seen as some kind of sinister animals. You can think of, say, I don't know, vampires, Dracula, and Batman, and so on. So there you have Batman and Dracula, whatever. Yeah, and again, there are many other examples we could show of how animals could be helped. And of course, in many cases, the harms that these animals have suffered have been due to human action, right? But in many others, they've been the victims of natural harms, because, often we can't tell. And still, it seems reasonable to think that it's good that these animals have been helped. In addition, there are ways of helping animals that are much more ambitious, that help animals significantly in certain areas. So one of them has to do with feeding animals who would otherwise starve. So these are some feeders, you can see them there. So they are designed so the food they provide is provided gradually. And you have here a night picture of some animals going there, feeding in these places. Similar initiatives have been carried out in many other places where animals, due to harsh weather or droughts or other reasons, can't get access to food. This is a picture from Turkey. And this is another picture of a place not far from where I am. This is northern Spain. And this was a few years ago. We had terrible snows that year. And a team guided by certain veterinarians went there to provide food in certain specific areas for animals they knew who were dying. They have seen already some deers and some other animals who were dying. These initiatives are often carried out for the sake of conservation because those promoting them don't want animals of certain populations to die. But still, this shows that we can help individual sentient animals in this way, right? And then there is something that is even more ambitious. And in this picture you see there, this is a screen capture of an academic paper. And you can see it's a paper about protection against tuberculosis in wild boar. So there are many other cases such as this one. So for instance, we have this other example. This is another paper vaccinating animals, about vaccination, animal vaccination against, in this case, swine fever. And here I have a couple of them more, just for you to see that it's not some crazy idea that some people have had. Scientific research has been going on this topic for decades already. If you see the date there, this paper is from 1989, and this other one is from 1988. And the fact is that vaccination, in this case against rabies, has eradicated this disease from wide areas in Northern Europe, in North America as well. And again, this has been done for the sake of human beings, because we don't want those animals to pass this disease to us or to the animals we live in. But anyhow, this has been a measure that has helped an immense number of sentient animals who were suffering, who were dying. And the way this is done is it's amazing. So these baits, who have some nice smell for the animals, well, they are they introduce the vaccine into them, and then they distribute them. Sometimes they distribute them with kind of feeders like this one. And in other case, they distribute them with helicopters. They just throw the vaccine. You know, I know this may sound like science fiction, but it's actually the way they are doing it. And it's working, right? This is from, you see the flag there, you may think it's the flag of Chile, but it's Texas, actually. Similar. Okay, so far we've seen some ways in which we can help animals. So now it's time to see why helping animals is something that matters. Now, there is this view which is widespread, which we can refer to as the idyllic view of nature, according to which life in nature is like a paradise. So all the animals are there, yay, enjoying, like, you know, in Disney films, singing together, and, you know, and then, the deer sing like, and the chipmunk sing, whatever, right? So I really hope things were like this. And for many years, I shared this idyllic view. And, you know, I'm reporting something from my own life. The fact was that although many years ago I thought that, animal ethics and environmental ethics were very different fields, and the reasons why we promote certain attitudes towards other human beings were different, I still thought that, well, there could be some convergence because animals in nature lead great lives if we leave them alone. So what we should do as animal activists was to, you know, just leave animals alone. So I started to do research on this to prove this view. And what I found was that this wasn't the case. So I struggled against this. I thought, no, this can't be so. For years, actually, I struggled against this view. Until at the end I thought, whatever. Yeah. No, it can't be. I thought it was true, but unfortunately it isn't, because animals face many ways of in which their interests are harmed in nature, just for natural causes. Without even humans intervening at all, they still go on suffering and dying for a number of reasons. One of them is natural disasters. You may think, well, many of them are caused by humans, but natural disasters anyway occur for natural reasons every now and then. And many animals die because they starve to death. As weather conditions are a bit harsher, they just can't make it. Even if they don't die, we may think, well, they are fit to these conditions, so they will be fine. But they nevertheless suffer, similarly to the way we would do if we were in their place. Many animals, for instance, even if they don't starve to death, nevertheless, they are hungry, often, most of the time. So, for instance, we can see this picture of this deer, and we can see how skinny he is. Disease is another cause of harms to these animals. They also suffer often terrible injuries for accidents, for conflicts with other animals, for many different reasons, right? And the thing is, many people think, well, that's not our business. We should just care about what happens to humans. But it's interesting because in the case of animals, if that happens to them and no one helps them, only because of this injury, you can get an infection and you may die in terrible pain. Whereas we humans have an alternative. So if we apply this idea of behaving towards non-human animals as we would like to behave, as we would like, others to behave towards us, and as we think it's right to behave towards other human beings, which is the main anti-speciesist viewpoint, well, it seems that something problematic is going on. And some people think, well, when you are helping animals, you are intervening there, and we shouldn't intervene. But the fact is that human beings are intervening all the time. And I'm just keeping this picture here because one way, for instance, in which we intervene is by building hospitals for us, or building libraries, or building towns where we live, like Venice there. Venice is a nice place. I don't know if you've been there, but yeah, it's beautiful, very touristic, and so on. That's a way of intervention in nature. They build it there. They transform the environment. So we may ask, why is it justified to do it when human interests are affected, but not when the interests of other sentient beings are affected? What's the point of making this distinction, right? it seems clear that some speciesist viewpoint is somehow driving us to have this attitude. Again, agriculture. We crop the land because we want vegan food. That's a significant way of intervention. Way more significant than helping animals in need of help. So why this double standard? In addition to this, we should bear in mind something that is even more relevant. And this is where I told you that the issue was counterintuitive, but it can get more counterintuitive. The fact is that many people, even if they may agree with helping some animals, may not be aware of the extent of the problem. So just to have an idea of this, we may have in mind how the lives of animals are in general in nature. And many people aren't aware that in nature, the overwhelming majority of animals just reproduce by having huge offspring. For instance, we have here how mice reproduce, you know? A female rat may have, I don't know, over 100 children throughout her life. Yeah, I know people don't usually speak the term children when it comes to animals. They say offspring and whatever, but you know, they are the children, really, right? And yeah, but what happens here is interesting because in the next generation, on average, only one of their children survives. And this is not universal, but it's still quite widespread. We are all aware of these animals who lay, for instance, hundreds sometimes thousands of eggs. There you have the frog with the eggs. Millions, for instance, in the case of some animals. In the case of fishes, you have there. This is small, tiny fishes. And many of them just starve to death when they come into existence, and many of them die in terrible ways. So the fact that animals have to have so many children shows us how hard it is for them to survive. Now, of course, this may seem like, wow, but then the problem is huge and we can't do nothing really to solve it. Whatever, it's fine. We're not talking here about solving a big problem with a capital B. But we can nevertheless solve small problems maybe with, you know, small P. We can help this animal, that animal, that animal. And for that animal, that will make a huge difference. And with the knowledge we have, we can nevertheless help many of these animals. So the issue here, and this is the last part of the presentation, how much time do I have? Because I've been told to rush. So yeah, we are making it on time. Good. So I'll try to rush in a way because I would like afterwards to engage in some conversation with you to see what your thoughts, objections, and questions may be regarding this. So, but anyway, this last part of the presentation will be about what to do, right? Okay, we know this is the problem. What can we do about it? So, first of all, I would like to present you this metaphor of the key. It's based on a joke that is not really a good joke, but anyway, it may be useful to this. So this was one person who was looking for something, and then someone else comes and tells, you need help? Can I help you somehow? Well, I'm looking for my key. I lost it. Okay, I'll help you. And they keep looking for it, and after some minutes, she said, well, you know, I can't find it. Are you sure you lost it here? Well, no, you know, I'm pretty sure I lost it over there. But there's more light here to look for it, right? So this is an attitude that we often have, right? So due to this, we tend to focus on the topics that are easier for us to tackle rather than the hard ones. But sometimes the hard ones are the ones in which we can make a bigger difference. And this may be well the case with regards to helping wild animals. By the way, talking about finding things, I lost my glasses on Saturday evening. So if anyone of you have seen a pair of glasses in room 1 or room 7, please let me know afterwards. Don't look for them here. I'm pretty sure they aren't here. Wherever. So yeah, so if we accept that we should care about this, what can we do? where to start? So there are actually some departure points that can be interesting. So one of them is, instead of trying to help animals out there in the wild, why not focus on first of animals living in urban or maybe suburban or industrial areas? This is something that, for instance, environmentalists may not oppose. And we can make it relatively easy. You know, we know better those environments, so maybe we should try to promote designing policies to help these animals first. Then something we could do is raising interest about this issue among those working in ecology, or maybe biology in general, and animal welfare scientists. You know, so we can develop a new field of research focusing not in community ecology or population ecology, metapopulation ecology, ecosystems ecology, but on welfare ecology, the ecology of the well-being of the sentient beings that are there. Then something we can also do is promoting compassionate conservation, right? Because then we will acquire the knowledge that may help us also to help animals. So, what about us? What about the average activist that may be around here and want to know, what can I do? So, cost-effective courses of action for us may include supporting the ways of helping animals that are currently feasible, learning more about how to help wild animals, so supporting, you know, the development of this field that I referred to before. Then challenging speciesism, because speciesism not only leads humans to harm animals, it also stops us from helping them when we can do it. And then spreading the idea in general that animals in the wild matter too, not only exploited animals matter. And finally, yeah, I'm gonna present some examples of how we can do this. And some of them will be a bit self-promoted, but whatever, you will excuse me, I hope. So this is an example. This is a journal. In this case, it's a journal of philosophy, which was published, a couple and a half years ago, or something like that, and was a special issue focused on the ethics of helping wild animals. So there are now a growing number of people working on this. So it's not just that I had this idea or whatever. No. There are other people, many other people who are interested on this. It just so happened that I'm here, but any of them could be here in my place. I can think, for instance, of Katia Faria, Brian Tomasic, you may have read something of him. People in Brazil, for instance, this is growing strong. Luciano Cunha, whatever. Many people, if you're interested in this, just let me know afterwards. And then, this is the self-promotion thing. This is the organization I work with. It's called Animal Ethics, and here you can see the T-shirt. Doing some promotion of this. Of course, in this case, it's in Spanish because we are in Mexico City, but it's an international group. And you can see there, this is a slide of an essay prize we awarded, and it was focused on essays on how to help wild animals and of how to diagnose the situations of animals in the wild. We also have, our website is in 8 different languages, English, German, French, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, I think Polish, and Chinese too. So there you have, again, a capture of our website in Chinese. And as you can see, we speak about animal exploitation, about animal sentience, and also about animals in the wild there. So we are trying to promote global concern about this issue. And I'm gonna leave some materials also if you want them, some leaflets and some stuff in the table there. And you can see here is an example of this, how some of the leaflets we have address wild animals together with the consideration of animal exploitation. So they aren't exclusive issues. And you can make it in a way that is attractive for people. You can spread concern about animal exploitation while at the same time we also raise concern about animals in the wild. And people are quite receptive to this, actually. We've been giving talks in different countries. This is a picture of a street stall. So there's lots of things to do. People are much more receptive to this issue that you may think of. I'm sorry to bring you all this bad news. I wish I didn't, But anyway, I didn't do it because I liked it. I mean, there are people who enjoy coming out, you know, with these provocative new ideas just to look cool and witty or whatever. I don't know what's in their mind, but I really feel bad about this. And it's an uncomfortable situation, but whatever, maybe it's not really that counterintuitive after all. So, well, if you want more information, you can look there. Or, yeah, we can engage on a conversation right now. So, thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your criticisms.
Well, we had time for questions. So, first one and the second.
It would be cool, just one second, so anyone has...
One by one, or?
No, I would say that it would be great. I mean, there is this policy that we've been implementing if women had the right to speak first.
Okay.
So, yeah, I hope everyone anyway has the chance to speak.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed this. I'm just wondering, and I think you're right, in many cases we should intervene and we have to be thoughtful about it and all that, but what does your view extend to preventing harm in the first place? So that should we intervene to prevent harms that aren't human induced? Obviously we should prevent our own, but harms by one animal to another, should we stop them?
Right, yeah, that's the typical intervention that many people have in mind when we are assessing this issue. And well, I would like to mention on that 2 points. So first of all is that the best ways to prevent suffering out there in the wild is not really by trying to stop some animals from harming others, but to see, you know, in what kind of situation there is in general more suffering and more harms for animals in comparison to others. So, for instance, one example of this is if we have an environment where we have lots of elephants. Well, elephants eat huge amounts of biomass. This prevents very small animals to eating that biomass. So if you don't have elephants, you have many more longer trophic chains there and much more suffering there, which means that it seems interesting, not just for the sake of the conservation of elephants, but also for the sake of preventing wild animal suffering, to have ecosystems where elephants are around. Of course, this may be counterintuitive in other cases. In this one, it may be so, but in others, it may not be. So that would be like my first point. Then the second point is this. If you ask me my views, really, although this is very counterintuitive, I am in favor of intervening significantly in nature, right, for the sake of animals, because, yeah, after many, many years of learning how terrible is the suffering they endure, the huge amount of premature death that is there out, I would be in favor of that. But still, I mean, although that's my view, I also want to be a pragmatist person, and I know that many people won't maybe go with me that far. So I'm very happy to have a much more moderate view and advocate for what we can achieve right now. So just try to advocate, for instance, as I did in the presentation, for intervening maybe in urban areas, industrial areas, and for instance, to to learn more about what the well-being of wild animals are. That would be what I would say about that.
Okay. Second question.
Thank you very much. Mark Pearson from Australia. In your work, have you had to grapple with or deal with the conflict between animals, wild animals, and agribusiness, agriculture of agriculture animals, or agriculture, grain, and feed for the world? So when this conflict, perceived conflict occurs, and one animal is seen to be less important than another animal, how does your research, what's the position that you take on that particular conflict?
Right, so you mean when there might be a conflict between defending a wild animal and defending the animals that we are exploiting, right? So, yeah, well, of course, and as you can guess, I think that we should consider equally all sentient beings, regardless of whether they are animals living in the wild or animals that are exploited by us. And all these conflicts are very tricky. So there are many cases in which no conflict needs to be involved because the same people who are exploiting animals are doing things that are harming the animals in the wild. But yeah, there may be other cases in which there is a conflict, such as the one you present. And in this case, I will honestly, I would say what I think. That I think that one of the most important things to do right now is to change the general speciesist attitude that people have towards animals in general. And because people tend to think that it's wrong to harm humans, even when there is some conflict of interest, and this may, on the long term, be good. If we defend that doing this in the case of animals, of non-human animals, is okay, then I think we will be promoting some way of speciesist thinking, because we have different ethical frameworks to humans and to non-human animals. So even if faced with a practical conflict, a practical case, even if in that case helping some animals would require harming others, and even if it were worth it, because the harm we would inflict would be smaller than the number of that the good we could do, still I would be reluctant about this, because I think that would promote speciesist thinking. So that's why I don't think that helping wild animals is something that we should promote if, in particular cases, if that were to somehow entail not opposing animal exploitation. But anyway, I think that in many cases this doesn't happen.
Oscar, have you found critics among environmentalists defending the idea that intervening in nature will make individuals or species more feeble or weaker and unable to survive from a biological or genetical point of view?
Yeah, I've heard that objection every now and then. The problem with this objection is that it's focused on what is good for species or for other entities. There may be more abstract or less abstract entities, such as populations or communities or whatever, but they are disconcerting sentient beings, and I think that sentient beings matter really a lot. So in the human case, we don't think that by preventing small children from dying when they have any disease or whatever, we are weakening our population or species. So I don't think we should have a different approach when it comes to other sentient beings.
Thank you, Jan Hoijmeijer from the Netherlands. Great talk. I'm working with wild animals all the time, parrots. They are kept in captivity. And one of my biggest frustrations is that until now, it seems to be very difficult to get people owning wild animals in captivity, like parrots, to get them involved in the issue of that species that they keep themselves in nature, like the African grey. The past year, African grey parrots has become Appendix 1 on CITES, most critical endangered. There are more African grey parrots in captivity as wild animals than there are living in Africa. And I can mention many species. More of them are living in captivity than in nature. And so far, very few animal protection organizations focus on the fact that we should engage those people that say they love their individual animals, to engage them in the welfare issue of the species. And especially knowing, from my experience, that most of those wild animals in captivity, that are loved by animals, suffer from ignorance, malnutrition, lack of sunlight, lack of exercise, social issues, and serious behavior. It should be a great focus to getting those people that are dealing with wild animals in captivity, to get them engaged in the whole issue of welfare of animals in general.
Right, so I think this will be my shorter reply, and is yes.
I'm wondering what about the intrinsic speciesism that leads people to prefer one species above the other, and for example, eating one species or several species and protecting the others, and yeah, just caring for others.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm totally with you on that score, and that happens in the case of animals that are exploited, but it also happens in the case of animals in the wild. So we care about certain animals, about big animals, about animals we consider cute, and we forget about other smaller animals or not so cute animals. So I totally agree. Yeah.
Oscar, as you know, Ralston is an ecocentric ethicist, and he poses in his book many cases of wild animals who are about to die from some sickness or whatever, and he says that the typical protector of animals would try to save them, and if they do that, they are going to deprive the predator from his food, and so he says that we should, the ecological cycles go on and don't intervene. I think, my opinion is that we should go case by case. In some cases, if we are going to deprive the predator from his food, we should let things go on. But in some cases, he speaks of the ethicist of Yellowstone, for instance. So the ethicist from Yellowstone will decide case by case, should decide case by case, when we should save the animal and when we should save the nature, follow his path. What do you think of that?
Well, I would say the same. I will give the same reply that I gave before concerning animals harming each other. And again, I would like to stress the point that I previously made, that when it comes to the ethics of intervening for the sake of animals, I have no regret in saying that I am totally in favor of extremely significant intervention, right? I said it before, I shouldn't hide it. But again, I think we should have a pragmatic approach. So even if I think that, and it would be great, I would think if other people share the view that this is really, really important. I'm also very happy with having a pragmatic approach where we can find some common ground, right? So, for instance, as you say, many environmentalists may disagree with this. So, well, why not then trying to find some particular cases where this may not be so? You know, we can engage in a friendly conversation, even if we strongly disagree, and try to see where we can get to some actual practical policy that may be supported by other people. So, for instance, John Berkalikot is here, and I think he strongly disagrees with many of the things I've said. And yet he's a really nice person. I'm very happy to have met. And I hope we can find some common ground when it comes to certain particular cases. I mentioned before, again, let me repeat it again. The case of starting with animals living in areas which have been already significantly transformed. Well, we can start there. So afterwards, we'll find some disagreements, and there are other disagreements we can find already now when they, for instance, promote certain ways of harming animals for the sake of environmental conservation. Yeah, I will certainly strongly oppose that, but still, I want to have this pragmatic approach too.
Hi, thank you very much for that presentation, Oscar. This is more of a critique than a question, but I'd like your thoughts on it. I agree with you that there is a danger of thinking that wild animals live these idyllic, utopian lives. But I think there's also a danger of thinking that wild animals live lives dominated by suffering. And I think that makes it too easy to ignore the importance of protecting and restoring nature. I think there's an empirical case to be made that healthy ecosystems are ecosystems with much less suffering. And when you asked, what can people do right now, I'd guarantee that pretty much every person in this auditorium, lives near a waterway that is polluted and that is poisoning animals and weakening them and making them more vulnerable to disease and what have you. And I just think that sensibility, it's important that that sensibility is a part of our understanding of our relationship to wild animals and their suffering.
Okay, thank you for that challenging question. So, in some cases, it might be that things are the way you say, but in some others, it might not be. So it may well be, and it has actually been, that humans have intervened in a certain area for anthropocentric reasons. They've changed that area, and the resulting ecosystem is better from the point of view of animal well-being than the previous ecosystem. So it's not always the case that living nature untouched results on an ecosystem with less suffering and less death for animals. In some cases there is. I mentioned this with the conservation of elephants, but in some cases things are the other way around. And this is the counterintuitive part that I mentioned, right? So by saying this, maybe some of you hate me, whatever. Sorry about that. Yeah. But again, I didn't say it because I want to be provocative. So I'm sorry, I hate that kind of thinking. But I think that's the way things are. And even simplifying sometimes ecosystems may result, actually, in less animal suffering. So this is the change in our way of thinking, and this is why, even though as I said, I had this pragmatic approach, there is nevertheless a clear, very, very clear difference between concern for animals, concern for sentient beings, and concern for other natural entities such as, species, populations, ecosystemic relations, biomes, or whatever. It's like environmentalism thinks that, sees the world in this way. So we are here, and then there is the environment that surrounds us, and wild animals are out there in that environment. Whereas the view I'm advocating for, which is the view that the animal movement assumes or accepts, is the view that it's not that we humans are there and animals out there are out there. Animals are us. Our group is not that of humans. Our relevant group is that of sentient beings. They are individuals just like us, so they aren't really just a part of our environment or whatever.
Thank you, Oscar, for the talk, and let me assure you that as an environmental philosopher, I don't hate you. The question I have is a little bit complicated, but I hope I can get it across. There's the famous introduction of wolves to the Yellowstone, and one of the responses in the academic community was to develop the concept of the ecology of fear. So that involves psychological suffering, but it enables the elk and other animals who fear the wolves to save themselves by not inhabiting the riparian zones, but it also makes room for, therefore, lots of other animals, beavers famously returning to the Yellowstone. So could the ecology of fear be a way of actually helping animals, even though it involves psychological as opposed to physical suffering, if that makes sense?
Okay, thank you for that very interesting question. I've been trying to assess that issue in 2010 paper in Between the Species, in which I was trying to examine the harms that different animals may be suffering after that intervention. So that intervention was bad for the wolves involved, because they had to capture some wolves living in Canada, bringing them there to Wyoming, which was stressful for them. So it's not that wolves were helped at all. And for the deer, or for the deers, because they are not an uncountable mass. For the deers, it was pretty bad for the reasons you've mentioned, because it's not just that they are hunted down by the wolves, it's that now they live in fear, and now their nutrition is significantly worse. This has actually been studied. But then, yeah, it has effects in other animals. So my view on that is that I don't know whether the resulting ecosystem has less suffering than previously. If we consider only, the wolves and the deers, it's clear that it contains much more suffering than it did before. If in addition to this, it promotes the presence out there in the Yellowstone area of many animals whose lives are bad, they contain more suffering than well-being, as it may be in the case, for instance, of very small animals in many cases, then it would be worse too. But more research would be needed, because also wolves kill and prevent from being their mesopredators. So maybe these mesopredators were eating other animals, and maybe that was affecting the environment in many other ways. So I don't really know. All I would claim regarding this is that if the measure resulted in less suffering, I would support it. If it resulted in more suffering, I would oppose it, even if, anyway, the measure had other advantages if we consider certain environmentalist aims.
Thank you, Oscar. Probably a bit of an expansion on the last question is, so the question of suffering. So say the environment that the animals are living in is causing some sort of, okay, so maybe in the case of starvation, they're struggling to find food. So you see a starving animal, and you go in and help that animal. You don't take it out of its environment, potentially knowing that maybe in a year's time it's going to be starving again, and maybe have more years of starving, and you might not be able to save it then. So how do you question the suffering that it's immediate there against potentially more years of that same suffering where you can't save them?
Yeah, it's a very good question, actually. And I would say two things concerning this. So the first one is that, in line with what I said, what this should lead us is to try to promote more research on this. This is really what's needed. And in fact, in order to develop this new field, we wouldn't need to carry out lots of field research. Even just considering the amount of literature that is out there already concerning how the lives of animals are, in many respects, we could already make some sound, reasonable inferences when it comes to assessing the suffering they may have in different situations. So I think that's important, and that should inform the interventions we carried out. But of course, when it comes to certain particular interventions where we can, find an animal and we can help him or her, I would assume here, and this is the second point, a view similar to the one we have when it comes to humans. So in many cases, we just don't know. It may be that you help a child that is drowning in a pond, and that child eventually grows up to be the next Hitler. You don't know. But if you don't know, I would support, helping rather than not. For this reason. And again, we shouldn't have this speciesist different approach for humans and for other animals.
Okay, the last question is now, no? Okay. This is the last question.
Thank you for that talk. I'm interested when you're concerned with suffering, and then but you're also interested in research. I mean, sometimes research involves suffering, like you talked about vaccines that save animals, but how are those vaccines developed? Like, how many animals suffered for those vaccines? I mean, I think sometimes we look to science as the solution without thinking it's a bit tricky in terms of suffering.
Yeah, it's a great point, actually. The thing with this is that those vaccines are already there. In many cases, the basic research that was carried out to develop them was carried out with the aim of developing vaccinations for human beings. Still, I can perfectly see that this is a problem. My point was that this shows us that helping animals is something that is feasible, and that if we are not doing it, it's because we are just concerned with what happens to humans. But still, I see that conflict there, and for reasons I already mentioned already, I wouldn't promote harming some animals to help others. Now, that being said, I think that the main research to be carried out right now has to do with developing, let me insist again in this welfare ecology or welfare biology new field of research. And again, doing this wouldn't really need to get involved in much more new field research, which could potentially harm animals. Rather than that, during the initial years of this new enterprise would be developing this new field of research, we should just take this whole bunch of literature on animal populations and on many other fields affected, considering how animals are affected, and then, deriving from there the reasonable inferences that can be done when it comes to how their well-beings are. So, for instance, there's a lot of literature concerning how variations in the weather affect the number of animals that die. There is also a lot of research on how many animals die shortly after coming into existence. Well, this can be clear indicators of the amount of suffering or well-being that there is out there. And actually, there's been some research on this. Well, before I mention the work that our organization is carrying out, so in addition to being a scholar, I try to work to change things as an activist too, as much as I can. And something we are doing is to try to engage with biologists in trying to figure out ways in which this could be furthered. So if there are any biologists around, please let me know and talk with me. And because I think this is being live streamed, if there are biologists around who are watching this, get in touch, please. You can get in touch there at our website. Or there are other organizations as well that are concerned with this. There is one group, for instance, which is called Wild Animal Suffering Research, which is actually focused on this, on carrying out research on this issue. So, sorry because I diverted a lot from your question, just out of my interest in saying all these things, whatever. But I hope that can help.
Okay, thank you very much, Oscar. And
thank you.
We are finished.